Welcome to Influence Interview, where my mission is to introduce you to people who will have a positive impact on your practice because of their expertise, their experience, and their example of great leadership. Today, my guest is Andy Cleveland, the Dental Accounts Receivable Ninja. Andy has more than one great thing going on, though. He is not only the AR Ninja, he is a connector, and like me, he loves to connect people and practices with industry experts. However, let's start, Andy, with your AR superpower. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Laura. It's an honor to be here, and I hope that we can bring some value to your audience today. So listen, thanks for having me.
Thank you. We are going to get started right away with what we were talking about before we pressed record. You were talking about Regulation F and the key things that dentists need to know, and I would love it if you would just jump right into that right from the get-go.
Sure. Yeah. So, and by the way, I'm not a CPA or attorney, so I can't give legal advice. I'm just going to give that disclaimer. Okay.
Okay.
But I'm going to give you the layperson's perspective on some very exciting collections legislation, if there's such a thing as exciting legislation in collections, which that's debatable. But for us, we're super excited about Regulation F.
Okay.
So if you Google Regulation F, Laura, you'll find that this is legislation that was enacted at the tail end of 2021, okay? And it's a fairly large document, but it's much needed addendum to collections legislation called the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. That was federal collection laws. They were written in the 70s, basically allowing collection agencies, right, to stop predatory practices, right? We've all seen Dateline where, you know, a debt collector says, right, I'm going to arrest you, right? You can't do that. So this legislation has been kind of the foundation for the collections industry since the 70s. And unfortunately, there hasn't been many updates to that legislation. So we're really happy that legislators have taken the time to actually update some of the collection laws. Mm-hmm. So there's many different facets of Regulation F. If you Google it, you can actually get the entire document on Google. But one of the most exciting things from a collection agency perspective is that collection companies can now start sending out texts and emails and even contact people that owe you money through social media. Those mediums are now becoming approved. And of course, there's, you know, caveats and rules and all that. But again, most of that collections legislation was written in the 70s. So you're talking about paper, pencil, pre-internet. We're finally, you know, at least post 2000 as far as like being contemporary with the law. So Regulation F, we're totally excited about it. It's much needed changes in legislation.
So that is interesting because I just got back from a privacy and cybersecurity and all the risk management side of practice, you know, dental practices and the things that they face. Are there, you said there's a lot of caveats, but is it complicated to stay compliant with sending text messages around collections?
So yeah, that's really hardcore compliance questions. I guess the short answer is the collection agency. So each state has state laws that are required of a collection company. And then you also have federal laws, which is the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. So you have to follow those rules and regulations. Regulation F, of course, adds to that. But the good news is you're asking, like, you know, what do you do to be compliant? That's an issue. The good news is all these laws are really only applicable to the collection agency. They're not applicable to the dental office because they're not acting as a collection agency. The collection agency is a third party authorized by the dental office. And that's why there's all these rules and regulations. It's not first party collections. It's what's considered third party collections.
Perfect. I appreciate you getting clarity on that.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to add to that. So if your dentists or any of the folks out there are interviewing collection companies, which I always recommend, it's kind of like buying a car. There's no one best car, right? For everybody, right? Like they all get us to work and back in the grocery store. So all cars are created equal in that regard. But people choose different models based on their preferences, right? Whether they want to do burnouts because they don't like their neighbors, or they want fuel economy, or me, we have a dorky minivan because we have kids and we need to get to place. The same thing is true for collection agencies. There's not one best fit for everybody, Laura. So when you're interviewing different collection companies, you want to find somebody that represents your brand and does, what you see as valuable when you partner with them. But the key is make sure they're compliant with Regulation F. So I would always ask any practice, hey, what are you guys doing to be compliant with Regulation F? If they look at you like deer in the headlights, that might be a time to pause, right? Because maybe they're not compliant. Great idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Great suggestion. Great tip. We have talked about tips before. In fact, if you go to my Facebook page, I have a video of some of the great tips that you have given to me before about things you should ask when looking for a third-party collections. Do you want to touch on some of those?
Yeah, and thank you, by the way. I didn't even know that was on there. So thanks a million. But yeah, you want to always be careful. And actually what I would suggest, Laura, is that video up?
It is up. You can go to my Facebook page. We'll put it on our YouTube page as well, and so that they can find it easier.
I would suggest, because that's kind of a multifaceted question, and I don't want to, just burn through that. I would suggest they go to your website and watch that video, because it's about 10 minutes.
Perfect. I'll put the link.
Yeah, great information there.
I love that. I'll do that. That's a great recommendation.
Thank you. I have great recommendations, maybe like once a month. So that's probably it for me for the rest of the month.
Okay. So how did you get into the dental, serving dental practices in this way?
Do you want the real answer or do you want the professional answer?
Maybe both. Which one's more entertaining?
Yeah, I'll give you the real answer.
Okay.
So back in 1998, I'm a master's trained clinical psychologist. I found out about halfway through my program, it just wasn't a fit for me. I just didn't, but I just, pushed through it because I didn't want to waste time and money. So I moved out to California and I was looking for a quote unquote jobby job because I have student loans to pay. Okay. After numerous interviews and getting turned down by Enterprise Rent-A-Car, it was the most, humbling experience that I was not qualified to wash and rent cars. I took the first job offered to me, and that was with a collection agency. And that was back in 1998. And I've just fallen in love with the industry. So now, what are we, 2022?
Yes.
So 24 years ago. And I exclusively work with dentists. I've worked in various capacities and with different collections partners over the years. But that is kind of like my core competency and my jam is to help practices with the job that everybody hates, calling people for money. It's no fun. Unless you're sadistic, maybe you enjoy it. Most people don't like calling people for money.
No, most don't. Yeah. Even when it's not negative, it's just although my kids do not mind calling me for money, they do not have a problem with that.
That's true, right? But you're in a safe place, right? If you're a dental office and you're barking at your patients for money and you're trying to simultaneously reactivate them, right? That's the problem. You can't do both competently, right?
It's all about. That you said that because I was looking on your, I can't remember where I saw this actually. Maybe it's just been talking with you, but the importance of having that system around collections and still maintaining your relationship.
Yeah, listen, if someone's just going for the jugular on your money, which I get it, it's an emotional deal. But sometimes the relationship is worth so much more than the bill, right? You have a cleaning for $150, but what if they were to accept ortho treatment or perio treatment, or they bring their cousin in that needs a set of implants? Big picture, the bill is really just a symptom of something of an opportunity much bigger. So I'm always very enthusiastic about making sure that you partner with a company that will not only go after the money, but the big picture is there's so much more value to that. And if you find someone that like doesn't represent your brand well, maybe you're getting negative reviews, you're getting people mad at you, you're losing patients, you might be doing more harm than good on what they're collecting for you. So I always caution anyone, again, to do your research and to pick a company that works right for you.
When do you find that practices most likely turn to you for your service? Is it when are they proactive, or are they usually finding that it's something they can't manage?
Yeah, like that's a great question. I hadn't really thought about it, but in this point in time, in kind of our post-apocalyptic zombie COVID world, I guess that's how I describe where we're at right now, right? Staffing is still an issue.
Right.
So the people reaching out to me are looking ahead. They recognize that their staff can't do it all, right? There's holes that need to be filled in the practice. And by quote unquote outsourcing, which doesn't mean you lose control of it, you're just hiring a partner to help you from the outside, is really a great idea to consider. So I find practices now are just like, we just don't want to send bills. We don't want to have to deal with this anymore. We don't want to be following up with people at 60 and 90 days. Let me just get off my plate so I can do what I love to do, right? Being in the back, getting bloody, and running the practice and giving people, an experience that they can really benefit from, that really solidifies and grows that practice.
What are some of the best practices around I guess what you do and how you can alleviate some of those pains? Because there's a lot of bits and pieces. It's not just about the collections. There's about the financial plan. There's a lot of things that can prepare, even handing it off to you. Do you have some thoughts on that component?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Running a dental business has gotten so complex, right? And you're right. Your job is to motivate and help with leadership with the practice, kind of from the top down. So yeah, we're looking at, people generally see this as a systems approach, I guess is the best way to look at it. Like in a traditional sense, using a collection agency was like extracting teeth, right? You would wait till last minute, right? There's no hope saving that tooth, and you'd pluck it, right? And it's bloody and it's traumatic and it hurts and nobody's happy. That's what traditional collections model has been. Now we're seeing a very nice shift to people really looking at best practices, running the business more efficiently. And we've kind of been forced to do that because of the strains that are on the independent practice, right? They have to compete with the DSOs of the world that have economies of scale. So they need to find different ways that they can fix what's broken. And let's just be really honest, like every business has accounts receivable and systems that are broken. So yeah, the past due accounts are usually a symptom of other things going on. Sometimes it's very realistic to fix it. Now what I'm seeing is with just trying to find people to like come into your office that have a heartbeat that will answer the phone, that's really difficult. So right now, I think the easiest solution is just to get it out of the office.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question or just babble for about 5 minutes?
No, you actually did answer the question, because, it's a multifaceted pain point, right? Like that you can't solve it with one area, but I do love that you have said that practices are coming to you proactively, because let's be honest, you can get into a really messy situation if you wait. And I'm sure you've seen those as well.
Oh, it's awful. And that's like, you can't send your kids to college. You can't retire on time. You're talking about thousands of dollars multiplied over multiple years of practice ownership. Mm-hmm. It's really sad when someone calls you too late. Like someone calls you, they're going to sell the practice and you're looking at the AR over 30 years. I had one guy that was just basically like crying because he was like, oh my gosh, I just can't believe how much money slipped through my hands. So we just had never connected. What about you though? Like when you're dealing with dentists and they're looking at ways that they can elevate themselves and run a better practice and have a more cohesive team, from a leadership perspective, are you finding like dentists are they coming to you when like just things are broken and they're just like just hitting the wall? Or are they like, okay, Laura, I know I've gotten to this level. How do I get my game up to the next level? Like, how do you see your practice owners viewing practice ownership, engaging with you and all the systems in their office?
Yeah, so that is a great question. I appreciate you asking. Most come to me with the proactive mindset as well. I think they're, like you said, they're kind of behind the gun with staffing issues. But they're in successful practices. But I love what you just said with, when you look at AR over 30 years and you go, wow, I left a lot of money on the table. And that's something that is so, you can easily grab a hold of a lot of those dollars if you act quickly enough, whether it be in collections, whether it be in how you set up your financial systems, or just even being aware of the analytics. We do on our end practice analytics through Dentometrics, which I know you're familiar with. And so there's and one of the things I love about doing that is it kind of shows where it can be an improvement in training or systems. It kind of brings to light some of those things I'm not even really aware of. So, but to answer your question, I think most people are pretty proactive. They're looking forward. And they're, innovative for the most part. Rarely have I come across someone who's like, I'm going to lose my practice. I need to improve my leadership.
Usually you can't save. Once they hit that point, there's really no saving them. It's kind of like going bankrupt. Right. It's like, just call it a day, start fresh.
Right. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Any other things that you would love to share about, your ninja specialty, the space that you're in, and where you would recommend people start right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've already kind of brought some of these up, looking at your KPIs, whether you use like a Dentometrics or you use your software, really being honest with yourself and looking at your KPIs and looking at, what's going on in your office kind of holistically. It's just like anything else, right? You have to be honest with yourself. I think that's kind of the first step. And then the second step, of course, is reaching out to great people like you that can help them fix those things. But sometimes even just, it's that, I think it's from, science class. There's the Hawthorne Effect. Do you remember the Hawthorne Effect?
No. Remind me, I'm way too old.
Yeah, I was never going to say that. So yeah, that's all on you. But I think it's called the Hawthorne Effect, where by the very act of looking and measuring at something, it indelibly improves without actually really doing anything, just because you're watching it. Absolutely. So you can even make a lot of mileage on your own just by looking at it and letting your staff know, hey, we're looking at this, why do we have 20% of the patients not paying at time of service? Like, at least they know you're looking at it. It's important to you. You're measuring it. And it would not be unseen if it started improving just because they know you're focused on it.
I so love that you said that. That's where we start too, is that awareness, because you're right. That Hawthorne effect is a very real thing, and it can have such a tremendous impact, not only on you, but if you make that awareness to your team. Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you don't see what's right in front of you. Right. And that's what I like to say from a leadership perspective. Like, you can't see the label when you're inside the jar sometimes, right? You need that. So
that's a good analogy. I haven't heard that one. I'm going to use that unless you've copyrighted it.
I have not. I stole it from
trademarked it or whatever.
Love it. Andy, it's such a pleasure having you. What is the best way that people can reach out to you?
I mean, the easiest thing is to go to my website, www.andy, Cleveland, like Ohio, CLEVELAND.com. You can read reviews, you can get on my calendar, or if you're just super bored and you have nothing to better do, go ahead and check it out.
I cannot recommend you highly enough. It has been such a pleasure getting to know you over the last, few months we met. We met several months ago, and I've had the opportunity to connect with you since then many times, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for being on Influence Interviews, and get in touch with andycleveland.com.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and thank you so much. I appreciate what you're doing for the world of dentistry. So we're going to keep moving forward.
Yes, we will.